Our Inspirational Indie Authors podcast stream is proudly sponsored by Book Vault. Sell high-quality print-on-demand books directly to readers worldwide and earn maximum royalties selling directly. Automate fulfillment and create stunning special editions with Book Vault Bespoke. Visit bookvault.app today for an instant quote. I'm Howard Lovey of the Alliance of Independent Authors and book editor at howardlovey.com, and you're listening to Inspirational Indie Authors. Every episode, I interview an Ally member to find out what inspires them and how they are an inspiration to other authors. My guest this episode is Tracy Cooper-Posey, a prolific author with nearly 250 books across multiple genres and 3 pen names. She began in traditional publishing, switched to indie in 2011, and now runs a family micropress. Originally from Australia and now based in Canada, Tracy writes everything from romance to science fiction to thrillers, and she has continued to write and publish despite serious health setbacks. I'll let Tracy Cooper-Posey tell her story.
Hi, I'm Tracy Cooper-Posey. I write fiction under 3 different pen names, including Cameron Cooper and Palin Carver, and I currently have nearly 250 titles published. I originally started writing for publication in the late 1990s, and I sold my first 2 books in the same week, and they were published in 1999. I've traditionally published 35 novels, managed to get all the rights back, except for 1 book, and self-published them. I started writing full-time in 2015, and I've been writing fiction ever since, and I love it. It's one of the best professions in the world. It can also have some heartbreaking downers too. But,
Right. Yeah, we'll talk about the ups and the downs too. So it sounds like you've been quite prolific. Let's start at the beginning though. Where did you grow up, and was reading and writing always a big part of your life?
Yes and yes. I grew up in Western Australia in a tiny little wheat town called Cadoo. There was no radio, no television, no cinema. There wasn't even a library. But my mum and dad owned the general store there, and my mother would bring in books. She would buy them for me. So I ended up, because I was the only girl in a town of 5 houses, everyone else was a boy and wouldn't play with me. So I spent all my spare time reading. And basically that was my life up until I got to high school. And in high school, I discovered science fiction, particularly the old classic anthologies with Isaac Asimov and all those good people in them. So yes, reading was pretty much locked in from the get-go.
Were you thinking at the time that you want to do this too, or did that come later?
Actually, what happened was in high school, I got to see this strange little movie called Star Wars that nobody else seemed to know about. And
Right.
fell in love with it with a huge clash and bang. Ended up watching it during the school terms. There's a 2-week break. And during my 2-week break while I was down in the city, I went and saw Star Wars nearly every single day. And I didn't tell anyone. Like, nobody knew. I was just sneaking off to the cinema to indulge this strange new obsession. So when I got back to Geraldton, the little town where I was attending high school, I started writing a story because I wanted to stay in that Star Wars world. So I started writing a story that came after the movie. And I mean, these days it's called fanfic. Back then, I had no idea anyone else did it. My English teacher caught me writing it instead of doing the English assignment that we had for that class. He read it and handed it back and said, write something original. So I did. I wrote a science fiction romance story that was like 9 exercise journals, exercise books. I don't know if you understand that. It filled up 9 books, and the English teacher actually had the women in the front office type it out and tried to get it published. So that was my introduction to writing. I mean, nothing happened. I think I would probably cringe if I got to read that now. The story is long gone though. So then,
well, thank you to George Lucas though for inspiring you.
Yes.
So did you go on to college after that?
No, My family were very middle class and felt that college was a waste of time for me. I'd be better off getting, a good steady job that would pay the bills until I got married. So I kind of bowed to the inevitable because I didn't think of writing seriously after that. It was just something that I had done then. But the storytelling idea kind of stuck around, and I would find myself writing stories on scraps of paper. And if I had an interesting dream, I'd write that down in the morning and it would turn into a story and things like that. But I ignored it while I sort of went through 2 marriages and had a couple of kids. And I was a single mother with 2 children and going to college for a law degree, a double actually, law commerce, and happened to trip over some old writing that I had done years and years ago. And I think it was a dark night of the soul, basically. I was reading through all this old stuff thinking, why didn't I do anything with this? So I quit college and started writing with the intention of being published. And that was in 1992. In 1994, I won a national award. And then in 1996, I moved to Canada because I met a fellow called Mark Posey online. And I think we were one of the very first romances, actually.
I was going to say, that's a little early for online romance. Yeah.
Yeah, it was purely text-based in those days. And anyway, I think that was 1996. And then 1999, I sold my books. So that was like my history up until I got published.
Wow. But you were driven, to quit college and to say, okay, no, I don't want to be a lawyer. I want to be a writer.
Yeah, I think finally the charms of living a real life had worn off. The power of storytelling was starting to make itself felt.
And so you sold your first 2 novels in the same week in 1999, which is quite a milestone. What do you remember about that moment?
Well, what I remember is a touch of disappointment because it wasn't to a big New York publisher and it wasn't to Harlequin, Mills and Boon, who had been my original, big ambition, but it was publication and I did celebrate rather hard. But honestly, I think it was more confusing than anything else because after that, nobody comes up to you and says, now, this is what you need to do next. Mm-hmm. And so, one of the books that I sold was a Sherlock Holmes pastiche to Turnstone, which is a publisher in Winnipeg. And it wasn't until 18 months later that the editor got back to me and said, well, are you going to write a second book? I'm like, oh, okay, I suppose I should. And that sort of got me going. But there are no guidelines out there, even for traditionally published authors. You sort of
Right.
You're sort of expected to land on your feet and just know this stuff. So, it was kind of confusing. But I think the biggest thing that struck me about being published like that was, oh, yeah, I want to do this full time. I want to quit the day job. So that became my burning ambition.
Yeah.
And
does that have anything to do with your switch eventually to indie publishing to sort of make it your full-time job?
Unfortunately, no. Most of what drove that was how I was being treated by the publishers. And I'm sure there's a lot of traditional authors that can give you the same sort of stories that, checks went missing or there was late payments. I got an email from a German publisher one day saying, congratulations, here's the cover for your new book. And I'm looking at this thing thinking, what? And I found out that my publisher at the time had sold the German rights to my book to a German publisher. They hadn't told me. I just found out when the German publisher contacted me and said, here's the cover, congratulations. And when I contacted my publisher and said, well, if you had told me, I could have done a lot of marketing and all that sort of stuff, to support the new book. And they said, well, we're not contractually bound to tell you, which... Okay, fair enough. That's true. But, and I think eventually there was a lot of silly stuff like that went on that's very maddening. And it's difficult to do any marketing because you've got to contact the publisher and say, can I do this? And will you help? And And
Yeah.
the lack of control over your career ended up driving me crazy.
Well, it sounds like the author is just an afterthought.
Oh, yes. Well and truly. They just want your book. After that, you can go away.
Right.
Except that you're expected to market your guts out at the same time so that they can get the sales.
Yeah.
And that's the thing I think too, is I still hear from authors or aspiring authors who want to sell to traditional publishing because they think that traditional publishing is going to market their books. And I'm thinking, no, it doesn't work like that at all. And I mean,
No.
even if it's written into your contract that they're going to spend, like $2,000 marketing your book, what that actually means is you're going to get a line in their catalog that goes out to the book publishers, and that's it. Everything else you're expected to carry the ball on that. So yeah.
Well, to even get a traditional publisher, they ask what you bring to the table. What's your existing audience? What's your social media following, etc.
Yeah, they want the platform there before you publish, which is kind of cart before the horse, if you ask me. But
well, you made the switch to indie back in 2011, though, which was kind of still the dark ages in self-publishing. How did you make that switch without all the resources that are available now?
I researched. John, and I've forgotten his name. There was one man out there, an author, who was doing exceedingly well in indie publishing, and he was running a hugely popular blog at the time. And he spent a lot of time talking about, you're mad if you go with traditional publishing, you need to go with indie. And I ended up writing a book that I was immensely proud of and sat with it thinking, I don't want to give it to my current publisher. They'll kill it. They'll screw me over in whatever way they can figure. And that was the decider, I think. After reading Joe's blog for all those months and then coming up with this really good book, I finally said, no, I'm going to self-publish it. So I just did that one book, and it took weeks to figure out what to do. I had to read around and read a lot of dashboards, and there were, I think, one or two author platforms that were talking about it at the time, but not much. But it was also a lot simpler back then too. And I published the book, and I think 3 weeks later, and within a day, I was tracking sales. And in those days, you could just publish the book and get lots of sales. It was that easy. But I suddenly were getting these sales that I could track on a dashboard. And if I talked about it on Facebook, I could see more sales happening. And it's like, oh, wow, I've got this control over the sales of the book. And then the check arrived at, the next month. And it was like, okay, I'm sold. This is, I've got all the control here. This is exactly what I wanted. So I spent 2 years working to drop the sales on all my traditional published books below the level that the contract said I could get my rights back.
Oh, I see.
And I went dark. I pulled them off my site, and
you wanted them to fail. So,
yes, I absolutely wanted them to fail. I did everything to make sure that they were buried. And then I tracked my royalties, month by month until they got to the point where they were beneath the contractual level. And I went, ding, 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 give me my rights back. And I finally got them all back and self-published them after that. And as I said, within 4 years, I was full-time writing.
Wow, that's amazing. That's textbook. But you took it, even a step further. I mean, you published, I think you said that since 2015, you've had over 200 indie titles, which is a huge amount. Most of us are happy to write 1 or 2 books in our lifetime. So
I'm afraid Isaac Asimov poisoned me in that regard. I mean, I love and adore reading anything Isaac Asimov has written, but I particularly like all his autobiographical stuff. He does a lot of interstitial essays in between his short stories and things like that, where he talks about the love of writing and how he loves writing more and more stories, and just the joy he used to get out of writing and writing lots and publishing lots. I mean, he wrote what they call Opus 200 for his 200th book, where he just talked about, I've written 200 books. And I think it's one of my favorite like memoir, I think you would call it. But yes, the love of being prolific, I think I got from Isaac Asimov because he just seemed to get so much joy out of it. And it was always, And for me, the story ideas, they're not, I've got millions of them. So
what does a typical writing day look like for you now?
It's pretty simple. I get up very early and we do breakfast and working out and dishes and things like that. And then I get to work writing and I write all morning. Then we do lunch, and afternoon and evenings, I take care of all the business side of stuff. And at the moment, that includes a small little side gig doing editing some magazines. But I'm in 2020, just before COVID hit, my husband was retrenched from his job, then the COVID lockdowns, and then my son lost his job. So they all came back to the house and we formed a little publishing company called Stories Will Press. So they were helping me with the publishing at that stage. So I got to crank out even more books, which was, I think, some of the best years of my life.
Did you launch that press particularly to publish your own work or for other people's work too?
It was intended purely for us, but we have since then, because we realized, well, we can help other authors too. So we've done a few curated anthologies, themed anthologies. We've got a couple of Christmas romance digests and a couple of science fiction ones. I think we did a thriller one too. We also, there's a author group that Mark belongs to, and they do an anthology, a couple of anthologies a year. So we publish that for them too. So we sort of do these little projects on the side, but primarily because I had 3 pen names going and my husband writes and publishes, and my son has actually put out a couple of short stories as well. The central publishing company served us better because it was like home base. And then we've got all the author sites that feed into it.
Mm-hmm.
And
is that why you went with a number of pen names to kind of feed into this one big business? You know, people talk about author brand. It sounds like you have many brands depending on on the genre we're talking about.
Yes and no, really. It started off that because I really wanted to write science fiction, and I had wanted to write science fiction all along. But I was intimidated because I didn't have a science degree and I didn't work in the sciences. And the idea, and everyone that I loved and adored in science fiction was a PhD of some sort or another. And so I thought that I shouldn't write science fiction because I didn't have the technical knowledge, which I eventually started to realize was not actually true. As long as you do your research, you're fine. So I started getting into science fiction. And at the time I was established as an indie author writing romance as Tracy Cooper-Posey. So I consulted with another much more well-established author who was a big name in science fiction and said, should I publish science fiction under my own name or should I do it under a pen name? And she said, no, absolutely do it under your own name. The reader's all sorted out. Don't worry about it. But what she had overlooked and what I quickly discovered was that Amazon algorithms, and I was in Kindle Unlimited at the time, Amazon algorithms were serving my science fiction books to my romance readers who didn't buy them. So it got confused and figured the books can't be any good. Then it tried to serve my romances to science fiction author readers who didn't buy them either. So Amazon figured all my books must be total crap and didn't serve them up to anyone. So suddenly my sales, and I'm in Kindle Unlimited, suddenly my Amazon sales are in the basement and I couldn't figure out what was going on. When I did, it was a big freak out moment. So I swiftly developed the science fiction pen name. And then the fantasy pen name Tail and Carver came along about a year later. And while I cared about the algorithms, I was very careful to keep the names separated so that there was no crossover. But now that I'm published as wide as I can possibly go, I don't care about the Amazon algorithms as much. And besides, if you're not in Kindle Unlimited, the algorithms are going to kill you anyway. So I came out as Cameron a couple of years ago when I came. Actually, it was kind of interesting. I came forth in Hugh Howey's self-published science fiction contest. And they wanted me to appear on a podcast. And I'm like, oh, I don't know how I'm going to do that because everyone knows I'm Tracy Cooper-Posey. And at that stage, I wasn't in Kindle Unlimited anymore. And I was thinking, well, there's no reason why I can't just say, hi, I'm Cameron. So I did. I came out as Cameron and Talon, which makes it a lot easier. Now, suddenly I'm building up this multifaceted brand that's Tracy, who's also Talon, who's also Cameron, because I'm quite open about I write in all these and all my sites cross over and point to each other and things like that.
Oh,
So,
okay. So you're not appearing, with a wig and a different accent or anything. Everybody knows it's you, right?
Yeah, everyone knows it's me. The little thumbnail headshots that I use for Cameron and Talon are me. They're just slightly skewed a little bit. One looks a bit cartoonish, and the other one I look like a Jedi.
Interesting. No, I suffer from what I'm calling multiple genre syndrome too. I write fiction and nonfiction, and a lot of times they have nothing to do with each other. So I don't have a pen name; it's all me. But I'm wondering, how much crossover there can be. It's a problem, and it might be confusing to any algorithm, I suppose.
Yeah, I think there's two ways to go. I actually I also happen to run a blog called The Productive Indie Fiction Writer, and where I talk about, among other things, writing lots of books. Isaac Asimov really got his hooks into me. And I did write on that blog a series of posts about using pen names. And it developed quite naturally over a couple of years. But one of the last posts in there, I proposed that for indie authors, another option to using pen names is to use an imprint. So if you develop an imprint for your nonfiction, and then, you could even just use your initials, so H. Lovey for your nonfiction. And you can have a separate site or just a separate subdomain on your site for the nonfiction, and then you're separating things. So, but nonfiction is kind of, because it's a completely different marketing mindset, I would imagine that you can separate them quite easily. And I have actually written nonfiction and published it myself. So, but
right, yeah. Let's talk a little bit about that too. You have your productive indie fiction blog, and you also write nonfiction. Are you giving advice to other indie authors, and what kind of, I guess, common struggles do you see?
Yes, the Productive Indie Fiction Writer is exactly what it sounds like. It's just ways to get around procrastination. It started off as a way for me to make myself accountable in public and make sure that I got all my word counts in, which really helped because I currently, until I got cancer, I was writing a book every 4 weeks. So writing and releasing a book every 4 weeks. So that helped me stay honest. So it was sort of advice for readers, and a lot of readers like it because it's primarily inspirational. If I can do it, anyone can do it. It's not like I'm, hugely productive and a machine or anything like that. I'm terrible. I call myself a relaxing, remitting procrastinator.
But if you tell your audience that I'm going to write so many words in such amount of time, then you have, once you say it out loud, you hold yourself more accountable, I suppose.
Yes, you do. And it sort of got to the point where I started feeling embarrassed about, I don't want to write a post this week because I've been so slack. And that sort of helped me keep up the production. But every time I figure out some way to get around this whole resistance thing, I make a post about it. And I'm constantly looking for ways to write more, especially now because I kind of lost my writing mojo as I was recovering from the cancer. So getting back into that routine I just reported about it all on the Productive Indie Fiction Writer. And the nonfiction book I wrote, it was just a big combination of everything that I'd learned over the years.
If you don't mind, can we backtrack a little bit and talk about your cancer if you feel comfortable talking about it?
No, that's fine. What do you want to know?
Well, what kind of cancer? And it sounds like you've recovered. So whatever you want to say about it.
I have multiple myeloma, which is incurable at this stage, but I am in remission. And that was kind of interesting because I ended up going through the cancer and the cancer treatment in a very public way, which we sort of happened quite by accident. I mean, the diagnosis came as a shock because I just thought I had a slipped disc in my back that wouldn't resolve itself. And when they finally did x-rays and stuff like that, they said, well, you've got 9 cracked ribs and you've got 4 compression fractures in your vertebrae, which might explain why I ended up in a wheelchair at one stage. It was impossible to get around. So they did an emergency operation because my C1 at the very top of your neck under the skull was collapsed and rolling in on itself. So the bottom of my face was going numb. And they diagnosed it and figured out what was going on. So I got thrown in a surgery where they replaced the C1 with titanium rods and plates and pins. And then they started the cancer treatment, which is you ultimately end up having what they call a stem cell transplant. They take stem cells out of your blood and then they give you an uber mega dose of chemotherapy. And then they give you your stem cells back so that they kill your immune system. And then they kickstart it again with your stem cells. And you spend 5 weeks in hospital recovering from it. And honestly, Howard, I wouldn't wish an enemy to go through that. It is a terrible process. It's just the most depressing thing you could ever do. But because of it, I'm now in remission. But you end up doing really, because when they destroy your immune system like that, you end up doing these strange things like you've got to have all your childhood immunizations all over again.
Oh, really? Right.
So, yeah. Huh. Anyway, 3 years to recover. And in that time, I wrote 2 books after spending years writing, anywhere between 20 and 26 books.
Well, that's amazing still. Only 2 books, that's, that's still a great deal considering what you were going through. Are you back to, almost your, I guess what you would call your normal pace?
I'm almost back to pace, but since I was diagnosed and went through the treatment, of course, the indie publishing industry has kind of imploded a little bit. Sales are down for everyone. Advertising doesn't seem to work anymore, or it's just way too expensive. So a lot of people are floundering around, and I mean, so am I too, because most of my readers disappeared and only the really loyal ones stuck around. So, my email list dropped off and it was just, it was pretty bad. And then on top of that, for the last year, of course, I mean, because this is all very public, we discuss it quite openly. Just as I was recovering, my husband was diagnosed with cancer. So I had to swap overnight from being the patient to being the caregiver. And my writing was again impacted. So he's now cured, absolutely cured, not even just remission. Wow. He's like that. Wonderful. He's completely clear of cancer. So he's sort of coming back to being a human once more. So my writing schedule was trying to get back to where it was. But in the meantime, because of the impacts and the slouching of the indie industry, we all have to spend more time marketing now. So I can't spend all morning writing anymore. I have to shorten my time and then spend more time letting people know that me and my books are out there, particularly as they haven't seen or heard from me in a couple of years.
Well, that's just an amazing story. We all talk about our distractions and we have no time to write because of work obligations or family obligations, but very few of us have tackled what you've tackled and still found time to write. That's amazing.
Well, I didn't think I did it very well, actually, because you hear these stories about writers who say, oh, writing is my solace and it's what keeps me going. It's just, honestly, I would open up my manuscript and look at it and I couldn't even make sense of it. It's just, the brain was not there.
Right.
But and it was a long, hard struggle to come back to. So I ended up writing a memoir about it because, of course, I mean, why not?
Right. That's what you do.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm still trying to get back to the capacity that I was.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what keeps you excited about writing and publishing these days?
Oh, storytelling. I just love storytelling. I mean, there's nothing better than, and I know it sounds horribly cliched and I'm sort of grimacing as I say it, but there's nothing better than diving into one of these big, complicated, detailed worlds with, huge back histories and characters that just go through these epic events and huge stakes. I mean, there's a reason that I write space opera.
Mm-hmm.
And all my favorite books are on the same level. So, I mean, Dune, for instance, and I'm not talking about the movies here. I'm talking about the books.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. And of course, Lord of the Rings. I mean, why not?
Yeah.
It's what marvelous. Mary Stewart wrote a series about Merlin, King Arthur's wizard. And that is an absolutely marvelous series. And it's a lot smaller and quieter, but it's still got those huge stakes. I mean, I'm a huge King Arthur fan anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's telling stories like that and wowing the reader. And I want to make an impact on the reader the way Star Wars impacted me. So I'm always looking for ways to impart those sort of stories that just leave people breathless.
Well, bringing it back full circle, have you heard they're re-releasing now the original Star Wars without all the extra stuff they added to it later?
Oh, no, I hadn't heard that. And that's good news because
that's great news.
Yeah, I have argued for years that not only did Han Solo not shoot first, the other guy never shot at all. So now I will be vindicated.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I'm of the same generation. I think I was in maybe 7th grade when it came out, and I saw it over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And it was quite inspirational.
It was, hugely impacting.
Well, thank you, Tracy. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me, and best of luck with everything.
Thank you. I appreciate you having a chat.
Okay. Thank you, Tracy.
Yeah.
Bye. You've been listening to Inspirational Indie Authors. I'm Howard Lovey, Content and Communications Manager at the Alliance of Independent Authors and book editor at howardlovey.com. This podcast stream is proudly sponsored by Book Vault. Sell high-quality print-on-demand books directly to readers worldwide and earn maximum royalties selling directly. Automate fulfillment and create stunning special editions with Book Vault Bespoke. Visit bookvault.app today for an instant quote. If you are a member of Ally and would like to be considered for the show, please write to me at howard@allianceindependentauthors.org and tell me what inspires you and how you can inspire other authors. As always, find more author advice, tips, and tools at our Self-Publishing Advice Center, selfpublishingadvice.org. And if you haven't already, we invite you to join our organization and become a self-publishing ally. You can do that at allianceindependentauthors.org.